welcome once again to Superconnectivity. I'm your host, Charlie, the Professor Esser, and with me as always is...
Phil, Philmy, and Parrish.
Hey Phil, always glad to have you. So, what's on the agenda for tonight?
That's usually your call, but I know we do have an email from loyal fan Kenneth Smyson.
Good old Kenneth. Oh, what does Kenneth have to say this week, Phil?
Okay, he says, "Hey guys, I've been enjoying the show as always, so I finally got around to finishing Daredevil Season 2. I must be in the minority of people that preferred over Season 1. I can see the complaints of it feeling more disjointed, and admittedly, the superconnectivity between the Punisher and Elektra arcs was weak. But much like how Iron Man 2 fleshed out the movie universe, this season fleshed out the Netflix universe and opened the doors up better. From a critical story structure point, the disjointed arcs take a beating, but I've come to enjoy that form of storytelling. Life isn't always neat and tidy, with perfectly executed themes and arcs. I suppose my shift in what I find good storytelling is brought about by Game of Thrones. Not for nothing, but that show loves to kill arcs halfway through theme, literally. I do like how the TV side of the MCU parallels the movie side as things progress. More than parallel, it introduces new ideas to the TV audience to seemingly prepare them for the new stuff in the movies. Daredevil Season 2 delved into the Hand and Black Sky, whereas Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 4 has gotten into Ghost Rider and those scientist ghosts. They should play right into Doctor Strange, and I do hope the Darkhold, aka Necronomicon, pops up somewhere in Doctor Strange. Okay, here's where it kind of falls apart, he says. And on the topic... Wait, no. Oh, wait, I'm not there yet. Never mind. Alright, and on the topic of Doctor Strange, do you think we will get an ever so subtle reference to the X-Men universe? With the movie introducing the multiverse, it only makes sense that would be the best way to have crossovers with the X-Men and Avengers. Personally, I wouldn't want them crossing over too often. They have their own universe to manage, but that seems the best way to maintain continuity between the two franchises while allowing them to have fun together in a wow. Alright, here's my problem. Lastly, Charlie, you mentioned the need for another host for Superconnectivity in the event Filled the Parts. My work schedule has been chaotic, but I'm hoping for a set schedule soon, Tuesday through Friday. When do you guys usually record, and have you considered having a short list of co-hosts that rotate throughout the show? Thanks always for the great show, Kenneth Smyson." Well,
I don't remember kicking you off anything. Did I say you were going to be leaving?
I think he might be confused with GammaCast.
Oh yeah, maybe I mentioned that we were looking for a host for GammaCast here. So
yeah, I'm not going anywhere.
So Kenneth, Kenneth, here's what I'm going to tell you. If you are interested in coming on one episode, if you'd like to have some talk with us, you are more than welcome to. Yes. Let us know what your schedule is. We usually record this after we do the roundup, which means that it could be anytime between 7:30 and 8:30 on Fridays, but we can work around your schedule too. That's Eastern Standard Time. And you know what? We'd love to hear from you. Like as far as some of the stuff you said, certainly. Let me think here. Let me just. Okay, so if you like disjointed storytelling, you're going to love Luke Cage. There and as well as Greater Connections Expanded Universe, Luke Cage gives us that, and what I think is one of the best parts about Luke Cage is it does end not neat and tidy, and that is one of the things that I think is best about it. Luke Cage. I'm not going to say that I liked the second season of Daredevil better than the first season. I thought both were pretty good. I honestly, I'm going to say I actually kind of like Luke Cage the best of all of them. So, but Daredevil was good. And, I think, all these products sometimes fall apart in their later episodes. Because especially, I think, in the first season of Daredevil, I think they were trying to, because they didn't know if they had a second season, so they were trying to wrap it up in a certain way that was a little too pat. And I think that in the second season of Daredevil, they knew they felt a little more secure, so they were more willing to have that more disjointed storytelling, which I do agree is a slightly better way of telling this tale. I think what we're seeing now with the other Netflix options like Luke Cage, they are recognizing that, even if they don't get to wrap up their stories, that's not the end of the world. There's Marvel is full of storylines that ended halfway through a season. So that's good. As far as ever getting the X-Men into the Marvel Universe,
I think they said it's not happening, at least not anytime in the foreseeable future.
Well, yeah, and if you want to call it Shelter Half an Entrenching Tool, if you want to call it really what it is, the fact of the matter is that the X-Men that you know and love over in the Foxiverse are never going to be in the Marvel Universe. And really, Marvel doesn't do... This isn't DC. We're not doing many worlds, There are worlds in the Marvel Universe, but they're not that kind of many worlds. I mean, we're not going to go to the X-Men universe, If we do another universe, we're going to the Squadron Supreme universe, where maybe you're going to get an X-Men pastiche. Which would actually be kind of fun. We'd have to make pastiches of all the X-Men characters because they can't use them. But they're going to go to that alternate universe where, okay, here's Biclops. And, I don't know what you would call Marvel Girl there, but Girl Marvel. There we go. An ice person, you could get something like that going, but I don't think that we're going to get like we saw in Flash when they do the Ultimate Universes, where we see the flashes of all the different variations of television universes over the years. When we did the, I think that was the Supergirl Flash crossover. We're not going to get that in Doctor Strange. So, but you know what? Kind of keep writing to us, and if you'd like jump in one day, would happily have you, But Phil is not leaving Superconnectivity anytime soon. For all of his busyness and schedules, he's still here. And but hey, you know what? And also give a listen to GammaCast if you like it. Let me know. We might be able to find a place for you.
And now,
okay.
Well, I was gonna say, but I was gonna say, I'm not leaving Roundup or Superconnectivity. I love it here. But if you're gonna watch Luke Cage, Kenneth Smyson, check out the Cage Cast with Charlie and Moz, man. Those two are a great team also.
Oh yes, that is my latest new Cage Cast, my latest new podcast. It's fun. I like this podcasting. It is a very addictive hobby, let me tell you. Is. Okay. So moving right along. So let's see, what do we want to talk about next?
Should we what?
Yes.
I was gonna say no, what did you have in mind, Charlie?
Well, so the first thing I thought we'd touch on, so there was, because you had steered me toward an interesting article, basically the artist's response to the Riri Williams cover, where he basically states that, I was asked to draw a cover based on this character. The art that I had of the character was this, and he shows the first appearance of Riri, which does have her in a midriff shirt, and standing in front of Tony Stark. And he says, so I don't know what made mine so much more sexy. He says, and this was something I had touched on, this idea of the power stance and how the power stance can be very sexualized by the male gaze. But I do want to make this point that I think I made the last time, which was that, sometimes something can be presented and it doesn't seem odd when you present it. But when someone says, hey, let's take a look at this, the best response is not, well, it wasn't that bad. The best response is, okay, I hear what you're saying. Let's discuss this. Let's look at what we did. Now, in this case, yes, this character was wearing a midriff shirt. Girls do wear midriff shirts. Many of the other covers had her in midriff shirts. Yes, the previous cover had her with breasts. 15-year-old girls do have breasts. That is not uncommon or unheard of. That is perfectly acceptable. What made this cover controversial was the power stance, which is sexual, which means that you're looking up through her. And what really made it was this feeling of an over elongation of her midriff, essentially an overstatement of certain characteristics that are meant to imply sexuality. Now, whether or not they do, whether or not they don't, the fact that she is in that skin tight outfit, which again isn't in and of itself horrible, but also can stand in an odd spot. And I know the site you turned us to was clearly a Geek Bros defense site.
Well, I just found it interesting because that's the first one I've seen where the artist actually answered back.
Yes, and it is important to get the artist's answer. But again, what I think the counter argument is that the answer should never be it was fine.
Yeah, the other interesting thing I saw, I can't remember the website I was on, but the artist, I think it's J. Scott Campbell, they took a image of, like, I guess he's doing, I don't know if it's another variant for an upcoming Spider-Man Renew Your Vows cover. They took a drawing he did of Mary Jane, and they kind of superimposed it on that image of Riri Williams, and it looked pretty similar proportion-wise. So, one, that is the artist's style, but two, it's like, okay, should a 15-year-old girl have the same proportions as a woman in her, 20s?
Yeah, late 20s,
Yeah.
That's here. And not for nothing, Mary Jane was always the, very well-proportioned girl of Peter's dreams,
Oh, yeah, she was a model, yeah.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, she was something that was always designed to be a little more than a 13-year-old nerd girl.
Yeah.
And what Marvel said is like, well, all of our interior art is this, and of course, what bothered people was the cover art, and of course, this gets to what we talked about a couple weeks ago, which is Supergirl's panties,
yeah,
and how commonplace the idea is to just be looking up her skirt, just because she's wearing a skirt and she's flying, Now you can make there. Well, what difference does it make if she's, if we're looking up her skirt or she's wearing a leotard? I mean, it's like it's the exact same thing because it's all painted on anyway. So there is this male gaze quality of it that and I do think it's a fair cop to hear Campbell's point of view, but I don't think, and I think that I think in the grandest of scheme of things, I don't think Campbell's cover was as offensive as it could have been. But I think it certainly was offensive. And I think that when you're dealing with a character like Riri Williams, who is already, Riri Williams is already on thin ice because she's a teenage black girl being written by a middle-aged white man, And as much as I'm sure Bendis, and I don't think Bendis is a bad writer. As much as I go Bendis a lot, I don't think he's a bad writer. I've actually always liked Bendis' stuff. I think he's a good writer. And I do think that he can get. And I really felt he's gotten Riri's voice very well, because I think that all things being equal, Riri's voice is not a typical teenage girl's voice. I think she is a super genius teenage girl's voice, and exactly how you present that is going to be slightly different than, many other variations on the theme. So you have that, and that's good. But, when you're walking into the controversy, you don't start saying, well, so's your mom, We say, you very politely say, okay, we understand your problems, and we do get that. Please understand this was just one variant. We're doing very different ways of looking at Riri, and did this one go too far, perhaps? And we're not going to publish it because clearly there's been a backlash, and it's going to be this cover will go out in a special edition later on that we're going to charge you $10 for.
But I mean, does Marvel share some of the blame for this, though? Because, I mean, love it or hate it, that is J. Scott Campbell's art style.
Yeah, well, no, and it is. I mean, it is. It is.
I mean, you know what you're getting with him when you ask him the job.
Here's what I'm going to tell you: is Marvel shares all the blame for it. But for what it's worth, that's why Marvel said our bad and pulled the cover. Because they were like, we got a guy who's popular doing the pictures of the Goyles on covers, and we thought, he's a Goyle on a cover. Why don't you draw us one? The fact of the matter is that it is what it is, and it was a choice that was made, and maybe it was not the best choice, but it was the choice they made. I don't really want to go. I don't want to talk too much about this because there's other stuff to get to tonight. But since you did send me the article, I did want to touch on it. I did think it was very interesting to see Campbell's response. Because like you said, it was not something we'd gotten a lot of prior to this. So that's good. It's good to see what he has to say. Moving right along. So let's now, of course, you were on our Enough Said Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. podcast this week. Because you guys recorded it just today, put it up today, and some of us were at work when you were recording, and so some of us didn't get to play too. I did have some thoughts on it though, and I would like to use my floor here to discuss them.
Please.
First off, and this I think is the most interesting aspect of this, is this question of, are we actually going to be getting magic? Because this is a real question in the Marvel Universe, is, are we really going to get magic? And is Doctor Strange really going to have magic? Or is it going to have something that looks like magic and talks like magic and walks like magic, but it's actually a duck? Is it actually just an extra dimensional duck, not magic? And we've gotten hints at that in this Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which is that, when they first start talking about demons and angels in the Darkhold, Coulson says, I've met gods. They tend to not be real gods. They tend to be
aliens.
Aliens, yes. And we got this week where, as they're looking for the Darkhold and go to the Blaze residence to look for the Darkhold, they mention that basically they're looking for the Darkhold to get an understanding of this science. And said, what if we had just done the science? What if we had just instead of spending all this time looking for this shortcut, what if we had actually just dedicated ourselves to figuring this out? And I do wonder if we're going to find out that Lucy is like the granddaughter of Whitney Frost. Because we only got her married name. We know she's Lucy, but we don't know what her maiden name is. We know she was married to this Joseph guy, and she has Joseph's last name. So she could be Lucy Silvestri. And really, if she's the granddaughter, she could be Lucy Smith, because, Whitney Silvestri's daughter married some guy named Smith, and they had her, but she would, sit at the feet of crazy old Granny Whitney, who would sometimes have these moments which she would talk about zero matter and the darkness, and she was the one who told her about the Darkhold because she gained that secret knowledge when she touched the face of Dormammu. I'm very interested in that, and I'm very interested to see what it's going to be. And they seem to be implying science, extra dimensional science, not magic. But I wonder if that's going to be a fake out. And here's where I'm thinking. It's often a thing. It's actually a trope of television that Santa Claus is real. I mentioned it before. Where people complain, they never show atheists on television. It's like they never show people who don't believe in Santa Claus on television. That if you're going to have an episode where we talk about Santa Claus is going to show up by the final scene. There's going to be something, and that is something that we cannot even accept in television, is that there is not a Santa Claus. So this idea that we're going to have everyone saying, oh, gods are just aliens, and this is that, and this is that. And then you have a guy like Reyes, the Ghost Rider, saying, no, I sold my soul to the devil. The devil came to me and said, hey, want to sell a soul? And I said, yes, I'd like to sell a soul. What do you offer? And I says, how would I attach your soul to this demon of vengeance? And all the vengeance you want, it's yours. Free of charge. So I do wonder if there is this aspect to that we are going to get that, no, you thought this was science. This is something so much deeper than science. And that's going to be what we get when we get to Doctor Strange, is that it is something that is deeper than science, but even more than just, because when you think about like even Marvel's magic, it tends to be just this idea of dealing with extra dimensional beings. And those extra dimensional beings might as well be, just aliens. But I think what we're going to get with Tilda Swinton and the Ancient One is that it's so much more than that. That there is this whole other aspect of reality that is beyond you. And going into that beyond is where we're going to see this knowledge. And so I do think that they are going to be moving towards this idea that, oh, it's just alien science, it's just alien this, it's alien that. And here's what I'm going to say. I think the thing about the Darkhold is that the Darkhold just shows you what you want to see. Because we saw that when they opened up the Darkhold, the pages are blank. But then it starts giving them data that they're looking for right when they open it in the language that they want. Because if we... so it shows you what you want to see. And so, of course, these guys are looking for this super science. So it says here some schematics to build your own zero matter doorway, which they built. But the thing is that, you know, if we go by what the original story of the Darkhold is, the Darkhold is like the Serpent Crown. It is a magical book that's going to show you what you want to see and promise you unlimited power. And in return, it's going to corrupt you so that eventually you bring Chetan back to this universe. I hope we get a Serpent Crown next season.
Yeah, you do. Atlantis attacks.
Yeah, man, let's get Atlantis attacks. Let's get going on this, people. But to Atlantis attacks, that brings us to our other revelation in this week's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which is that Jeffrey Mace has a secret that he does not want revealed. And what that secret is an interesting question. It's implied that what the secret is that he wasn't at Segovia, or not Segovia, he wasn't at the UN bombing from Civil War, that he didn't save those people's lives. That might be a cover story. But here's what I think is deeper than that. Because whatever the truth is, Phil knows it. Because Phil had the black box. Phil knows stuff that people don't know exists. And one of the things I think Phil knows is who Jeff Mace was. And the fact that Jeff Mace was the Patriot in the Marvel Universe, I think can't be overlooked. And that Jeff Mace is an Inhuman, I think is important to the story too. And here's what I'm wondering is, you know, what if Jeff Mace was the Patriot? What if Jeff Mace was the Captain America just after World War II, that he stepped in for Steve Rogers during World War II in the All-Winter Squad, partnered with Namor and the Human Torch, and Miss America and the Wizard. And that was where he was. And then when he got to be a point where he didn't want to be Captain America anymore, then William Burnside came in. And of course, William Burnside eventually destroyed the legacy of Captain America, which is why we never got another Captain America. And it's possible that this is the same Patriot, but they don't realize that because he's young. They only know that he was a former Captain America. And they also know that Captain America eventually went insane. But he can't be the Captain America that went insane, because Phil would know that, and Phil wouldn't put him in charge if he was the Captain America that went insane. So he has to be the Captain America who was Captain America before William Burnside. But he doesn't want people to dig too deep into his past, because then it's going to bring up William Burnside again, and maybe even go deeper into, you know, the actual post-World War, the post-Steve Rogers experiments on African-American soldiers and things like that. So there's a whole dark history of Captain America that Jeffrey Mace may be aware of that he doesn't want brought out. That if people really knew that he was the former Captain America, even though I think basically he got re-euthaned when he went through Terrigenesis, because I think he was probably an old man, maybe married to Betty Carver or Peggy Carter, maybe married to Betsy Ross. We may pull out Betsy Ross yet, too, you know. Although we should get Haley Atwell to play Betsy Ross. That'll be fun. Just have to put on like a real American accent and be, I'm Betsy Ross. No, I was married to Jeff. And, you know. Oh, that'll be fun. He said, yeah, well, my little nephew Thaddeus used to hang out all the time. That's some super connectivity, kids. But yeah, but that Jeff got re-euthaned by the Terrigenesis because he did have this Terrigen. He did have this inhuman quality, and then. But I think that's the secret. He doesn't want the legacy of Captain America sullied. Even though Captain America's kind of sullied it, I think he's maybe even sitting there saying, look, I'm not even going to say that Captain America did wrong. And I think that right now there's a lot of people out there that think Captain America still is doing right. I'm not going to bring out what we really did to make Captain Americas in this country. I don't want that. I don't want what our association with Zola and the crew that led to Isaiah Bradley and whatnot, coming out. Although, man, wouldn't it be great to get an Isaiah Bradley eventually in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.?
Oh, yeah.
And I think exploring the Captain America mythos is something they're going to be doing here because it seems like they're setting themselves up to do that. So that's my take on this. And right now, I think this is our third episode of what we've seen and what we're getting. I think that the idea that magic is just alien science is a fake out. I think we are going to get that it is real magic. But I think that it's going to be set up into a certain point. You're going to think, oh, yeah, it's just aliens. It's just aliens. It's just aliens. Extra dimensional beings, whatever. It's just another Thor, just another thing. And then probably about the time that Doctor Strange comes out, it's going to be like, oh, no, this is something very different. This is Mephisto. This is, this is Satanish. This is Master Pandemonium.
Ooh.
Another great character that we can get here in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Or Damon Hellstrom.
Yes.
And who's currently dating Patricia Walker.
That's bad.
That's what we want. Oh yeah, man. If we got a Patricia Walker crossover in this, tag with it. Fine. Keep your Luke Cages, keep your Jessica Jones, keep your Daredevils. Give us Patsy Walker. That's who we want. And we want Phil to say, "Oh, I was a big fan." And never say, "Wouldn't you have been like in your 20s when it came out?" I watched it ironically. Say, you didn't watch it ironically, did you? Say, no, I love the show. That's what I want to see. Clark Gregg as a Patsy Walker fanboy, that's going to be awesome. But if she's dating Damon, it'll come up interesting. And Stan Lee as doing a cameo as Monaco. Come on, make it happen, Marvel. Monaco and his drowned rabbits. Speaking of Monaco and his drowned rabbits, so very interesting article got posted today in Comic Book Resources. Not the one that we talked about earlier, but actually a review of Doctor Strange came out, and I was interested in this review, although a little, it basically, it was a very lukewarm review, which is not usual for CBR. Because this is usually real comic book nerds talking real comic book stuff about comic book movies, and usually they are as glowing as we always are. But this was really, almost a negative review. Now, one of the things they made a point of was that it wasn't as good as other Marvel films, which, of course, right there creates what I think is one of the most interesting aspects of our world genre films. This is actually a new thing. You've had films that crossed over before, but they were from one author. So, you could have the View Askew-verse, you could have the Buffy-verse, you could have all these things where different writers kept everything in their own universes, and these things would cross over. What Marvel is doing and what DC is trying to do is to create this idea that you can have a universe with multiple voices, multiple artists, and they're all going to be connected by the fact that they all exist in the same universe. And by that notion, something that we have said is that I think that Suicide Squad got much better audience and critical feedback as negative as the critical feedback was for Suicide Squad, I think they actually got a lot of very positive feedback too. But I think a lot of that was the fact that this was the first time in this universe that people felt that someone really got their voice right. That this was the right voice for this universe.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in Doctor Strange, I think you might be seeing this backlash. And of course, and here's what I'll say: every Marvel movie that comes out, there's always a number of very negative reviews.
Mm-hmm.
There's always some negative backlash saying, "Well, this isn't this, and this isn't that, and we really wasn't as good as it could have been." All that said, I think that there is this this effort to judge it more harshly because it is sharing lineage with some of the best films in the comic book genre universe that have ever been put out, and notably one of the most powerful that universe, Winter Soldier, just came out seals. So you had what was arguably the best film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe just coming out. And then this is its follow-up, especially when again, and then again, it's also following on Luke Cage's heels and the Netflix success. And it's primed to be, because it's going to be doing it something different, taking its story in a different route.
Mm-hmm.
It's primed. Now, one of the things I thought was very interesting was that the author at this point that, how unlikely Benedict Cumberbatch is. That his Doctor Strange, he's always arrogant, he's always an insufferable bore. But for me, that's a very defining quality of Doctor Strange. He's always arrogant. He's always, yes, he is humbled at times, and he is often brought low, but the fact of the matter is that when he's dealing with a lot of other people, he tends to be very haughty, because he is the sorcerer freaking supreme of Earth. And he understands things that guys like Tony Stark and Reed Richards don't even want to look at. They don't even want to pretend this is a thing, So they're going to avoid it, the plague. And he gets to sit there, much the way that, Charles Xavier gets to sit there at times and look at these guys who are looking at the universe in a certain way when they themselves look at it in a much deeper, much stranger way, just to intend the pun. And then they talk to these guys, and these guys who are ostensibly the smartest men on the planet, but they don't even want to look at what you're doing because it so flies in the face of everything they understand, everything that they can test and measure, observe, and see. So Doctor Strange is often seen as very standoffish, very mercurial. He never wants to help you when you need his help. Because it's like, I kind of have to keep the mindless ones from running amok, I kind of have some stuff to do. Can't solve your little ghosty problem, Go talk to Agatha Harkness. Go call Monaco. I got bigger things to do. But as I said in my response to the review and like the Facebook post, that even Monaco can't resist throwing shade at Doctor Doom when he encounters him, just saying, "Oh, he's not a real sorcerer. He's he's a dabbler, a pretender." But of course, to every other person in the Marvel universe, Doctor Strange's a great wizard. It's like, not really. He can pull off a decent trick or two, and he can con a demon once or twice. But he is not a great sorcerer. He is not a sorcerer supreme. He is not at that level in the slightest, So, that arrogance, I think, is indicative of wizards. And quite frankly, I think the idea of unlikable heroes might be something worth investigating, Mm-hmm. I mean, sure, it's like unlikable heroes who are very witty and that jovialness helps them. Arguably, Tony Stark is not likable, but his jovialness helps him. But I think that maybe having a more dour, it's a different flavor. And if you're not used to it, and if you go in expecting ice cream and you get potatoes au gratin, you're probably not going to be very happy. But you know what? As good as ice cream is, potatoes au gratin is pretty good too. And, maybe we should just enjoy the potatoes au gratin for what they are. But in an interconnected universe, you don't always get that chance. Okay. And speaking of interconnected universes and comic book resources, did you read the recent, actually it's called When We First Met, it was the article, it wasn't a legend or anything, but basically some wise reader named Charlie E., who could that have been?
I don't know.
He wrote into Brian Cronin at Comic Book Resources to make mention of the fact that despite his ample knowledge of comic books, he had no idea how Misty Knight had lost her arm, or if she had always had her arm missing in the comic books, or if this was something that happened later. How was this first addressed? And it got written up in CBR as a really good book. I highly encourage you all to read it. I'm not going to spoil it for you, but if you have been sitting there watching Luke Cage saying, when she's going to lose the arm, or if you are ever read a book with Misty Knight and say, well, how did she lose that arm? Now you can find out. Go to Comic Book Resources, CBR.com, and look up Misty Knight's bionic arm, and you will find out exactly how she lost her arm. You will also find out that I was mistaken, and Scarf has been in the Misty Knightiverse since the very beginning, because you see him in one panel. So as it turns out, I was mistaken that Scarf first showed up in Marvel Knights, and I may be mistaken that was actually even Scarf. That might have been a different character altogether. I think that where that character was drawn looks a lot like the actor playing the Scarf in this, whereas the actor playing Scarf, or the character drawn as Scarf in the old Misty Knights, looks a lot more 70s Magnum PI looking guy. So, looks a lot more like Deadpool from the Deadpool Secret Wars. So, it's an interesting question where Scarf comes from in that sense, but he clearly started. I don't know much about Scarf's history there, but hey, right into Brian Cronin, and he might tell you, when did Scarf first become a corrupt cop? Or maybe he wasn't back then. Maybe that's like, what's her name? The Question in the Dark Knight series, where they made her and just decided to make her into a corrupt cop too. So, but that was good. And to that extent, also because of this, I also want to plug the fact that we are going to have Brian Cronin on Superconnectivity next week to discuss super connections and comic books and CBR and the wonderful work that he does there. Okay. Is there anything else you want to talk about this week, Phil?
I think that's it.
No, that's good enough for 1 week. We had a long Superconnectivity, a couple minutes extra here on... I'm sorry, we had a long roundup and a couple minutes extra here on Superconnectivity. So you're getting your money's worth, folks. This isn't like a Deadpool book where we make you pay $10 for this. So... Well, if they would like to reach out to you and talk to you about all this exciting new changes in the Marvel Universe, where can they reach you?
If you want to talk about anything Marvel or even DC Comics, or if you have a question for us and our special guest next week, Brian Cronin, you can email me, nightwingpdp@gmail.com. On Twitter, I am at nightwingpdp. And just check out my various podcasts on the Southgate Media Group. And you can find those on the website or southgatemediagroup.com. Yeah, southgatemediagroup.com, or on my personal website, philparrish.wordpress.com.
Okay, and of course you can write to me in that old-fashioned email way, the way our Maz and Paz once did, at superconnectivityblog@gmail.com. That's superconnectivityblog, all one word, at gmail.com. And of course, follow me on Twitter as I live tweet Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. when I don't fall asleep. Legends of Tomorrow. I have 5 minutes to myself when I get home, and the trains don't prevent me from getting home. And of course, the Incredible Hulk, Saturdays at 7 o'clock when I don't have to do laundry. At Charlie Esser, that's CHARLIESSER. Look for the 2 E's in the middle for quality. Thank you for connecting with us, ladies and gentlemen. Please connect with us again. Good night.
Good night.